So
Thank you.
we're going to move to item 4. We have the El Camino Real roadway improvement from Arenal Road to La Costa Avenue. And Mr. Hussein is going to do the presentation, I believe.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Goken, Vice Chair Press, and the Commission members. My name is Hussein Ajide. I'm an engineering manager, and joining me is Mary Elizabeth Westrom. She is a senior engineer with our design consultant, Dock and Engineering. And we are here this afternoon to provide you with a presentation on El Camino Real roadway improvements from Arenal Road to La Costa Avenue, project number 6051. Recommended action for this afternoon would be that the Commission support staff's recommendation on recommended alternative for the San Marcos Creek Bridge segment of the El Camino Real roadway improvements from Arenal Road to La Costa Avenue, Capital Improvement Program CIP Project 6051. So this aerial view shows the project location. As I mentioned, is El Camino Real from Arenal Road to just north of La Costa Avenue. A little bit background on this project. The project, like I said, is in Capital Improvement Program, and it is project number 6051. El Camino Real, or ECR, is missing in this segment, is missing southbound through lane and sidewalk. It's missing street lights on the west side. It's missing northbound sidewalk along existing bridge over the San Marcos Creek, and it also missing buffered bike lanes in both directions. So basically all these justify the project that we are presenting to you today. So the project includes the following improvements. The project will widen southbound ECR from Arenal Road to just north of La Costa Avenue. It will enhance bike lane in both directions. It will provide northbound and southbound sidewalk along ECR over the San Marcos Creek. And it will add new street lights on the west side of ECR. Some design considerations. So when we initially started the project, gave the consultant green light to start the process. They came back and presented like 5 alternatives. So we looked at the alternatives. We provided some feedback to the design consultant and asked them to basically include certain design guidelines. The highlight of the design guidelines we provided to the consultant were 8-foot bike lanes in each direction with 3-foot buffers, and also 8-foot sidewalk, again, on each side of ECR. So the consultant received these guidelines along other feedback and comments that we provided to them. They modified the alternatives, and they came back with 2 final alternatives that meet these design criteria or design guidelines. So again, reminding that the project is from Arenal to La Costa, but this presentation we are providing today, it's focusing only on the bridge segment of the project over the San Marcos Creek. And this aerial shows the existing condition of the bridge. As you can see, ECR in southbound direction is missing the third travel lane. Also, this segment is missing sidewalk on both sides of ECR, and also we are missing buffered bike lanes here. So alternative 1, we call it a straight alignment. This is basically pretty much a standard design with the standard bridge. It provides 3 11-foot travel lanes in each direction with 19-foot median. It provides 8-foot bike lane with 3-foot buffers in each direction, and also 6-foot sidewalk. But this alignment requires significant improvement to the existing bridge. So the bridge will need to be widened, expanded on both sides. Therefore, it requires significant, basically, impact to the lagoon and sensitive habitat. It also requires relocation of major utilities. As you can see, on the west side, we have a 16-inch Kinder Morgan fuel line. Our understanding is that this line takes, fuel um, to Camp Pendleton. We are not sure how extensive and how significant this process would be, how much it's going to cost, who's going to pay for it, but we know it's going to be very, very significant and very expensive. In addition to that one, we have 30-inch SDG&E gas line that crosses the creek and it's embedded. Even though we are not going to do anything to the gas line, but typically utilities don't allow us to build permanent structure over the lines. So we think also that 30-inch gas line will need to be relocated. On the east side, we have some communication utilities along with 8-inch recycled water. Both alternative requires relocation for those utilities, so we call them minor. But the two on the west side, Kinder Morgan and SDG&E gas line, they are major relocation. So again, pretty much a standard design. The next slide, I'm going to go through pros and cons of this alternative. Besides the environmental complexity and longer environmental review and permitting, this alternative is much more expensive. Construction cost, the preliminary cost estimate we have, it can cost almost twice as alternative 2. Just construction of it is almost 1 year longer, not including the relocation of the utilities and permitting process. So again, alternative 1, so pros, it provides 8-foot bike lanes with 3-foot buffers. It provides new pedestrian connectivity on both sides of ECR. And cons, it doesn't provide the 8-foot sidewalk that we require the consultant to consider. It only provides 6-foot sidewalks. It has significant impacts to the lagoon and sensitive habitat, like I mentioned. It has higher construction costs and design costs. It has longer environmental review and permitting process, and requires major utility relocation. So alternative 2, again, we asked the consultant to be a little bit more innovative. So they call this alternative swing out alignment. So this alternative doesn't require significant improvement to the existing bridge. In fact, the existing bridge is not touched. So that's why the impact associated with this alternative is much less. The pedestrian connectivity is provided by installation of 2 single-span prefabricated bridge. Doesn't require placing piles into the lagoon like the alternative 1 required. And it provides, similar to alternative 1, 8-foot bike lanes with 3-foot buffer for both directions. It provides 8-foot sidewalk on both directions. In northbound direction, we can retain the 3 11-foot travel lane. However, for the southbound direction, just for the segment over San Marcos Creek, the travel lanes is reduced to 10.5 foot. So that would be the only change in regards to the benefits. So instead of having 11, it would be 10.5. For this alternative, unlike alternative 1, doesn't require relocation of major utilities. As you can see here, the 16-inch fuel line and also 30-inch STG gas line, they are not going to be relocated. Similar to alternative 1, the minor relocation of communication utilities and recycled water is required. Also, the bridge on the east side will have to be placed outside the existing right-of-way. So we need to basically obtain some right-of-way from the property owner just for the pedestrian bridge that will be installed on the east side of the bridge. Again, alternative 2 is a recommended alternative. Pros for this alternative, it provides 8-foot bike lanes with 3-foot buffers, 8-foot wide separated pedestrian connectivity. It doesn't require major utility relocation. It will reduce impact to the lagoon and sensitive habitat. It has less environmental complexity and faster permitting process. Therefore, along with shorter construction schedule, the project can be implemented much faster than alternative 1. And the construction and design costs are also much lower than alternative 1. The cons, as I said, it just requires additional right-of-way needed to be obtained for the east side sidewalk. So I try to summarize basically both alternatives with regards to some design consideration here. So 8-foot bike lane with 3-foot buffer, both alternative 1 and alternative 2 can provide that. For 8-foot sidewalk, alternative 1 cannot provide that. It only provides 6-foot sidewalk. Alternative 2 does. Alternative 1 has significant environmental impact and complexity. Alternative 2 has less environmental impact and complexity. Alternative 1 has longer permitting process and construction. Alternative 2, shorter permitting and construction window. Lower cost effectiveness, again, that associated with alternative 2, relatively speaking. And alternative 2 does not require major utility relocation. Alternative 1 does. So, and that's why staff is recommending alternative 2 as the preferred alternative for this segment of the project. So next steps, like I said, we recommend alternative 2. After receiving the commission's input, we'll direct the consultant to prepare the project plans, the specification and cost estimates. We'll work towards obtaining the necessary permits and provide mitigation measures for the environmental impacts associated with the project. We'll also at the same time work with the utility companies for utility relocations. Coordinate property acquisition. Like I said, the separate bridge on the east side of the ECR will need some right-of-way, and we'll return to Traffic and Mobility Commission with 90% plan sometime in the spring 2023 before we go to the City Council for plan approval and obtaining authorization to bid. So it's really hard to estimate the construction schedule at this point because of the environmental review and permitting, but we are targeting a construction completion sometime in late 2024. Again, recommended action, reminding everyone that we are here to obtain the Traffic and Mobility Commission's support towards staff's recommended alternative for the San Marcos Creek Bridge segment of the project. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any question you may have.
Okay. If you stop sharing, I can see the commissioner. Thank you. Okay, commissioner questions. Okay, I see 2. We're going to start with Commissioner Pensier.
One of the questions I have is with respect to the 10.5-foot travel lanes. I see you've already had to narrow the median, and I wonder why you didn't just narrow the median another 1.5 feet and keep the 11-foot travel lanes. Is that something that there must be a good reason for that, I guess?
Sure, and I know Commissioner Linky had the same question. So we had a lengthy conversation with the design consultant on this one. Like you said, the median has been reduced from 18 feet to almost 6.8, and this is due to traffic needs to be shifted towards west, and then needs to be shift back to east in order to match the existing alignment. And in order to get enough storage room for the left turn pocket into the shopping center, we need to, the taper has to have certain length. And so this is the best they could do at this point. We can get the comment and we can look into it further, but that's a compromise to get basically 11-foot bicycle lane on both directions.
Okay, Commissioner.
I had one more, and that was with respect to the additional right of way on the east side. Do you have any idea what the cost impacts are of that? Who do you have to? Is it just one property owner, or do you have to negotiate with a bunch of them? And would you have to use eminent domain?
We are looking into it. It doesn't appear to be very expensive. We did the same thing for ECR and Canon. We are also installing a bridge over there. It's in construction right now. So we don't anticipate to be really expensive. Our estimate is less than $150,000 max. But we haven't done any appraisal yet. And I believe we have only one property owner.
Okay, Commissioner Linke.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I'm going to go off of what Commissioner Pensier has just mentioned, although I might lose his support with my proposed solution to that. I thank staff for bringing this to us. I created a few slides to provide some background. I don't know if Mr. Schmidt, could you bring that up? So my main concern is about the 10.5-foot lanes, basically just for that 190-foot bridge, narrowing the southbound vehicle lanes, and then reopening them up. And I know the city has had a sort of a general policy of reducing the vehicle lanes from 12 feet to 11 feet when restriping or doing other road projects, which helps create the wider bike lanes with safety buffers, and I strongly support that to encourage bicycling. In this case, though, it's unclear to me why we have to go down to 10.5 feet. So just for a little bit of background, this first slide shows two maps from the most recent pre-COVID traffic monitoring report. And the map on the left shows peak vehicle volumes, and the street segments that are highlighted in purple there are the ones with the highest peak volumes in Carlsbad. So for example, towards the top, you can see segments of El Camino Real around Cannon and College. And in the middle, there are segments of Palomar Airport Road that are purple. And on the right, much of Rancho Santa Fe is purple. And then the red arrow is pointing to this southbound segment of El Camino Real that we're talking about today. And there, nearly 28,000 vehicles per day travel that facility, including about 2,800 during the peak hour. And if you include the northbound side, that segment of El Camino Real carries well over 50,000 vehicles per day. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, leave it there for a second. And the other map on the right shows the level of service, and you can see that generally the purple areas are the problem areas, and adding the third lane, whether it's 10.5 feet or 11 feet to southbound El Camino Real, is going to resolve that level of service F red segment you see at the red arrow. But what I would say is that there's only a handful of streets in Carlsbad anymore that are prioritized for vehicle travel under the new general plan, and with other modes only being accommodated to the extent possible. So I want to be pragmatic here and say that streets that aren't our major arterials, definitely we should look at going below 11 feet if necessary to accommodate bicycle safety. But on these few streets that are left that are arterials, I think we need to look to keep vehicles moving. And I don't think we'll compromise bicycle safety at all. So if you go to the next slide, please. And this is the slide from staff's presentation showing the 3 southbound on the left there, 10.5-foot lanes. It seems like that extra 1.5 foot, as Commissioner Pensier's mentioned, could come from the median, or if that's a problem with the pocket. I guess the question is, can the bike lanes be reduced to just like 7¼ feet rather than 8 feet, or even just on the southbound side go to 6½ feet, or some combination thereof. So if you go to the next slide, it's a picture. This is the picture of the southbound side looking north. So the current bike lane there, I think, is about 6 feet wide. The key here, though, is that from my observation of going along there, is that that's a very flat area. There's no gutters, there's no dips, there's no grates, there's no other obstructions that might be a problem. And so if you picture that now with an additional 3-foot buffer, plus maybe an additional half or more of a foot added to that bike lane, it seems like that's not compromising the ability of a bicyclist to take that. And by doing that, then you don't have to do this constriction down to 10½ feet from 11½ feet just for that bridge area. So just based on our general plan, the street typology is prioritizing this street for vehicles and the sheer volume of traffic. And I don't know what the consequences are of having cars jog over to the left. I know on Rancho Santa Fe Road, where the lanes are reduced, there's some awkward jogs at intersections where, and that's a good compromise there, but it just seems unnecessary to make this temporary jog down to a smaller travel lane when we have the room, and I think it's a luxuriously wide and flat and nice space for the bicyclists with the full 3-foot safety buffer. So I would favor a plan, not alternative one. Obviously, that's environmentally and monetarily doesn't make any sense, but the one where we just keep the current bridge but change the cross section to retain the 11-foot vehicle lanes, I think is appropriate in this context. So I don't know if staff has any comments on any of those suggestions, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Linky. So like I said, we are really early in the process, so we can take into consideration these comments. But the project team has had lengthy conversation about this, and we feel comfortable and confident with that 10½ feet. I know Mr. Frank is gonna take an item to T&MC talking about the travel lane width design standard. So if you notice, that's 11 foot is what Caltrans is doing on freeways, and people are driving like 70, 75, 80 miles per hour within that 11 foot. So there are studies that I'm sure Mr. Frank is, when he's going to take this item to the commission, he's going to bring those studies that basically links the safety versus the travel width. So like I said, we can look into it further. It appears the only place we can take that 1½ foot, it would be from bike lane and the buffer. I don't think we can split it between the two sides. It has to come from the southbound travel lane and the bicycle lane. So I don't know if Mr. Frank, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Ajita, I'll jump in with a couple of points. One, as you alluded, the city is updating their road design standards. So I intend to bring back an item where we discuss mobility related design updates to get the commission's comments on them, so we can publicly vet the proposed updates. And I think that will be a good thing and an informative thing for the commission and the public, and as well get the best updated standards which we can get. A couple of points. One is there's a lot of studies out there, and I know Commissioner Linky is probably well versed on this. I could share my screen and show some data curves and some sweet spots, but in general, for arterials, the sweet spot is somewhere between 10 to 11 foot width vehicle widths to promote the safest travel lane width. And there's a lot of different factors like the road geometry, the shoulder configuration. But for many urban settings or suburban settings with arterials, the travel lanes are being redesigned to 10-foot vehicular lane widths. And the city of Encinitas, as an example, is recently, actually they have a project approved and it's going into construction this fall. And it's going to be realigning the travel lanes from Liebenheim Road, or that's also Leucadia Boulevard, south to Encinitas Boulevard. And their travel lane widths vary from 10.5 foot for the number one, or that's the most inside travel lane. Their middle travel lane is going to be 10 foot wide. And then their outside travel lane will be 11 foot wide next to a buffered bike lane, which is typically 3 foot buffer and a 6 to 8 foot width bike lane. So my point is that's just one example of a neighboring agency which has varying travel lane widths, varying from 10.5 to 11 feet. Additionally, if you think about the congestion, or first of all, I'll stay just on the safety aspect. Where we have the room, I agree with Commissioner Linke and Commissioner Pensiers, and it's great to have 11 foot wide travel lanes if we have the width, along with a 3 foot buffer and an 8 foot bike lane. It's where we don't have that width where we have to think of compromise. And on this road alignment, Commissioner Linke, if you could share your screen again, just with that street view, showing the existing conditions with the travel lanes, and there's a bike lane. We're seeing 85th percentile speeds on this road segment between 50 to 59 miles per hour. So that's 85th percentile, so pretty fast vehicular travel speeds. And then you have your bike lane, a buffered bike lane, which we're proposing. And beyond just traditional bikes, you also have a variety of other mobility users, which you'll see out on the roadway today. And I just think that with future adaptation or inventions that are coming online with our electric mobility, you're going to see more and more uses with electric scooters and all the different mobility options that are coming into fruition today. So if you look at this cross section here, if you just envision our typical 8 foot wide bike lane with a 3 foot buffer, you're going to be having a variety of different users with the vehicles traveling next to them between 50 to 60 miles per hour. So where we have the opportunity, I like to provide as much buffer as we can for those additional users. So that's kind of the trade-off which we have to consider. And then lastly, I wanted to just touch upon the congestion issue with arterials, which we're dealing with, like El Camino Real. The congestion points tend to be the intersections. And so as we heard the public comment earlier, they were suggesting coordinating our signals, which we are doing, as you know. But the reason why I'm bringing it up in relation to lane widths is if you have wider travel lane widths, that if you think of, excuse me, the pedestrian crossing distance, the wider the travel lane width it affects the overall length of the pedestrian crosswalk distance. And so if you have narrower travel lane width, let's just take the example, it's an easy example of like 12 foot travel lanes versus 10 foot travel lanes. And we have 6 travel lanes out there. So you're gaining there's a differential of 2 feet per travel lane for 6, that's 12 foot difference. 12 feet difference for pedestrian travel greatly impacts the efficiency of the signal efficiency. So as our streets get more congested, which they will be doing with all the state law changes regarding land use and increased density, there's going to be more vehicles on our streets. There's going to be more alternative modes of travel, like bicycles and everything else that's being invented today. Everything's going to have to work as efficiently as possible. And when another form of mobility, like a pedestrian, crosses a push button, that pedestrian phase is going to have a significant impact on the efficiency of our intersections. So that also lends itself for the city finding the most, I would call it the sweet spot for the travel lane width. So I think the comments we heard from Commissioner Linke are spot on. Where we have the room, I think it's good to design for that extra half a foot, or, we are going from the old standard Caltrain width of 12 feet down to 11 feet. And then the real discussion is, should we take that 11, where is our real sweet spot? Is that 11 feet or is it down at 10 and a half feet? I think it's a good discussion, and I would like, as Mr. Ajide said, or Dr. Ajide said, bring an item back to you regarding our street design updates, and we can address our lane widths in more detail at that time. What I would suggest is just allowing us the flexibility in this case to look at what our best alignment is to address all of the users of the roadway. So I don't think there's going to be a tremendous impact to the vehicles of this segment, whether we go with 10 and a half or 11 foot travel lanes. I am concerned about the other users of the roadway when we start reducing their area from 11 feet. And I would call it an 8 foot bike lane, because there's other things in the roadway. And as Commissioner Linke said, in this segment of the bridge, it is a very flat surface, so you don't have gutter issues or drainage pan issues. But it is a confined area. You do have like a curb or a bridge structure on each side of the bridge. So it is kind of a confined space. So I would just make, I want to be able to maximize the right balance for all of the users of the roadway, and I don't really want to pinch.
I have a question. Because it is confined, would there be a possibility, instead of the 3 foot buffer, to put a concrete barrier? Is that standard? Would that?
Well,
I would think it makes them feel more comfortable, but I'm not sure on the design.
Well, not for the bike lane. There's issues with providing options for bicyclists to go around broken down vehicles and other issues that come up in the roadway. But like you've seen out at Poinsettia Lane on that new bridge, there are barriers against the pedestrian sidewalks and areas. So in this case, if you go with alternative 2, that would be separated from this area, so they would have obviously
right. But I'm talking about the bicycle lane. It would not be possible, or it would be a danger because the bicycle will run into it, or it's just not practiced to put.
Well, there's issues with like vehicles breaking down, and then they'd have to get over to the right lane. So on corridors like this, where if we go with alternative 2, and there's actually going to be a separated pedestrian walkway, at this point, we'd feel comfortable recommending buffered bike lanes. We're not ready to go to a class 4 bike lane in this circumstance. And also next month's agenda, we're going to be bringing forward the Kelly and Park project, and we can have discussions about the pros and cons of class 4 bike lanes versus buffered bike lanes. But I'm sure we'll hear some other comments. I'm guessing Commissioner Pensiers will chime in about class 2, and Mr. Kim might have some comments as well. But yeah, any comments like that we welcome. I just ask Commission to give us some flexibility to make sure that we're addressing all the users of the roadway.
Okay.
And
Vice Chair Perez has a question. Sorry, after Mr. Kim, Vice Chair Perez, you can ask your question.
I just wanted to add that this was a conscious design decision that the staff, the team, design team made. There was the option of reducing the bicycle lane width, but I think all of us felt that we wanted to preserve the 8 foot width with the 3 foot buffer on a road such as El Camino Real based on the vehicle speed. And there was no option to take that width from the median because we need that total 10 foot spacing for the left turns that eventually, I think right now they're showing a 9 foot area there, and that's because it's tapering to a total of 10 feet where we need to have a minimum of 10 feet to provide left turn access there. So there was not the option of taking it from the middle and we chose to preserve the 8-foot, 3-foot configuration for the bike lane, the buffer. I don't know if that makes a difference, but I did want to point out that that was a conscious design decision.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah, so kind of getting back, Dr. Majid, do you happen to have, can you go back to the screen? I think it might be a bird's eye view of that bridge on El Camino Real. If not, if it's all right, I can show my.
I have it in Google Maps if you don't have it open.
I can share my screen. I don't know if it's
Go ahead,
all right
please.
or not. Yeah. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a quick question. First one of two is, again, here's just our bearings. So this is La Costa Avenue, south on the bottom, north on the top. I'm moving into grid to the bridge. The question that I just have is, if we're gonna widen this southbound on El Camino Real to 3 lanes, the question I have is, do we have to remove this island? And is there, I guess that's the first question.
I don't think so. I can have Mary Elizabeth from the design team provide a little bit more details on the design. Mary Elizabeth, are you available to answer the question?
Yes, I am. We would need to reduce the width of the median, but we wouldn't need to get rid of it completely.
Is that, and you said that was, you would need to reduce?
Correct. We need to reduce it to just over 6 feet, from 18 feet down to 6 feet.
Okay, because you can see the point where I'm getting at is that this is kind of like an hourglass where you're going to have that pinch on the capillary, or whatever you want to call it, where it's going to reduce and then it's going to widen out. So yeah, I guess the only thing for me is just to note that, you know, these medians, it seems like you're going to have to really do thin them out or reduce the width of that. So I just wanted to be clear on that one, which I appreciate the information. Second part is regulation-wise, how feasible would this be, or do we have to work with the California Coastal Commission?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, similar to ECR and Canon, the impact will be pretty much minimized because we are not impacting the sensitive habitat within the lagoon. So so we are hoping that this environmentally, that would be the MND. So it's much less complex compared to alternative one, because like I said, we are not placing any piles into the lagoon.
And just for me, it's just when you mentioned on the west side of the bridge, there's a petroleum line that goes through. That kind of is a little bit of a concern. You know, I mean, no matter what, if we go with alternate 2, that is a possible risk, you know, from a risk management point of view or risk view. You know, if something were to happen to that, that could be a disastrous thing to our protected wildlife land right there. So just a comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yeah, I'm looking at figure 2, alternative 2. I take it the pedestrian bridges are not to scale there. In other words, the railings are not like 10 feet high. That's just some kind of rendering for it.
That's true.
Commissioner Dinky.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up after staff's comments. Another thing I didn't mention previously is that this is El Camino Real. There's limited streets in the city that are truck routes, so we've got large trucks. I know that North County Transit District also provided testimony at a Traffic and Mobility Commission meeting a few years ago before I got on, but I looked in the minutes and they prefer 11-foot wide lanes for their buses. I mean, they're probably fine with 10.5 feet, but with large trucks and buses, I think that's another argument in favor of retaining 11-foot lanes. Again, the 8-foot lane is, I think, ideal for a lot of streets that have like wide gutters and grates and other things. But if you've got a perfectly flat, nice surface, even the worst case scenario of a 6.5-foot bike lane that's like a perfect scenario is plenty wide with the 3-foot safety buffer. As far as safety studies on safety, I've seen studies say both ways, that you can get more side swipe accidents at lower widths, which are probably less dangerous than a head-on collision, but and other studies that say they're the same or reduced. So it's sort of, I think the jury is out basically on the safety issue. And as far as theoretical future mobility modes like scooters or other things that are not there yet, I would say that in the future, if something becomes prominent that we need to have a special lane for that, I'm a little skeptical of that, just because it's really the speed of the mobility device that defines what lane they need to be in. So if you've got a bike lane that has to be shared by recreational bicyclists who are going slow and e-bicyclists who want to go 25, or some newfangled electric vehicle that wants to go 30 or 40, they can't all share that lane. But if and when that time comes, I think that if we're not putting anything on the bridge, then you could always restripe it in the future to accommodate those uses. So just based on the general plans, designation of that as a prioritized vehicle route with only accommodation for other modes like pedestrians and bicyclists, that we should stick with the 11-foot bike lanes, and at least as part of the planning process for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
That
Mr.
wants
Linky.
to comment, or go ahead, Mr. Frank.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on two comments that Commissioner Linky had mentioned regarding NCTD and their recommendations for lane width. Yeah, I've heard that 11-foot too, and the argument with them is, given their legal vehicle width of an 8-foot bus, that's the maximum width that vehicles are allowed to have. They also need to account for their side mirrors. And so that was established prior to a lot of cities going with buffered bike lanes. So we do have that buffer bike lane area that would accommodate mirrors. And on other arterials as well, you still have, you know, if you have the maximum width of a bus, say it's the maximum 8-foot wide, you still have the additional foot on each side of that. So just wanted to share that information with you, but they do recommend where you can to get the 11 feet. And then secondly, regarding the uses of the buffered bike lanes, I agree with you regarding the future uses. There's actually out there, I see fairly frequently along El Camino Real, other users like old school scooters, like teenagers and even adults using, you know, the foot, the kind you don't have to just step on, you know, the electric throttle to get going. I see people out there with old scooters and skateboards and other slow moving types of mobility. So that's, again, and I heard your comment, Commissioner Linky, about maintaining the 11-foot buffered bike area. Those are the users that I'm thinking about when we're trying to preserve that area.
Okay. So, anyone wants to make a motion? Okay, Commissioner Hunter was the first one that raised his hand.
I'll make a motion that we go with staff's recommendation.
Do you have a second? Commissioner Pensier, second that.
Yes.
Can we go for a vote?
Commissioner Wanamaker is absent. Commissioner Linky?
Oh.
Did I hear no, Commissioner Linky?
I was wavering, but I voted no, yes, no.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Pensiers,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Perez,
Yay.
Chair Goken.
Yes. And now I gotta do the math. It passed 4 to 3, 2
Five.
voting no.
We got
Oh,
5.
but we got
Wait.
5, but we're 7 people, right?
Yeah.
So
Commissioner Linky vote no, and we have Commissioner Wanamaker absent.
did Vice Chair Fred said no or yes? Yes? Yes, okay. So I misheard. I thought you said no. Okay, now it is 5 to 2 with 1 no and 1 absent. Is that good, Ellie? You got that? Okay, great. So it passed. We're gonna move on to, before we move on, I would like to take a 5-minute break. What do you guys think? We've been at it for almost an hour and a half. Yes. So let me see what time it is. Let's come back at 4. Let's do 7 minutes. Let's come back at 4:30. Okay?